everybody. Thank you all for coming, and we're very happy to have Rabbi Yitzchak Breitowitz give the Torah shiur this year. It's in ilui nishmat Tamar bat Oded, Chaya, in memory of Tamar bat Oded and Chaya. Rabbi Breitowitz, as many of you know, is a relatively recent Oded with his wife to Yerushalayim only 9 years ago. He was a rabbi of the Woodside Synagogue in Maryland for 25 years and a professor of law at the University of Maryland for 30 years before that. He teaches primarily at Or Sameach and the Israel Center and other places, mostly around Yerushalayim, known as a Talmid Chacham and a very loving presentation of Torah to Am Yisrael. Thank you, Rabbi Breitowitz.
Thank you so much. And again, I want to welcome the new faces today. And Bezrat Hashem, our Torah learning should be ilui nishmat Tamar bat Oded and Chaya. So anyway, I'm a little tired. I actually had to go to London for one day. So I just came back shortly before the shiur. There was a Talmud of Or Sameach who was getting married, and it was important that I be there. So if I fall asleep or whatever, please. I hope you don't fall asleep, but if I fall asleep, that'll be okay. So anyway, I want to talk about the fact that the Ramban tells us that the book of Shemot has three fundamental themes in the book of Shemot. There is Yetziat Mitzrayim, there is the Exodus from Egypt, and then there is Matan Torah, the receiving of the Torah, and then there is Hakamat HaMishkan, there is the building of a Mishkan. And these are essentially the three themes in the book of Shemot, with some unfortunate detours like the sin of the golden calf and the like. And it's interesting that in Hasidic writings we actually find that the theme of Shemot, those three themes, they parallel the journey that we are supposed to make in our own lives as we develop a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The first is Yetziat Mitzrayim, and I've mentioned a number of times already, so forgive the repetition, the beautiful thought of the Baal HaTanya. The Haggadah tells us, Chaya v'adam lirat es atzmo, each person must regard themselves as if they themselves were taken out of Mitzrayim. And the question becomes, I was never in Egypt, I was never a slave, am I supposed to make believe something happened to me that did not happen to me? What is the meaning of Chaya v'adam lirat es atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa mitzrayim? And the Baal HaTanya's beautiful, and I would actually say immortal interpretation is that Mitzrayim has a double meaning. Mitzrayim, of course, is the nation of Egypt, ancient Egypt that enslaved us. But Mitzrayim comes from the word mitzarim, boundaries, limits, constrictions, blockages. When David HaMelech feels trapped and in desperation, and he turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for Yeshua, he says, as we recite in Hallel, Min ha-meitzar karatika, I call out to God from the narrow, confining limits. So says the Baal HaTanya, based on this idea, each person has their own Mitzrayim. Every person has their Mitzrayim. I could live in affluence, but I could be a slave to my laziness, my anger, my hate, my negativity, my lack of self-esteem and appreciation for our own gifts. Whatever it might be, that is my Mitzrayim. And that Mitzrayim is much more difficult than an external Mitzrayim, because that is a Mitzrayim within you, as opposed to something being without you. And says the Baal HaTanya, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu took the Jews out of Mitzrayim, he put into the Bria a koach that enables each and every one of us to attach ourselves to that process and become liberated from the Mitzrayim within. So the inner meaning of the statement, each person must regard themselves as if they were taken out of Mitzrayim, does not mean I make believe I was in Egypt, but rather I identify my Mitzrayim, and then through the koach of Yetziat Mitzrayim, I become liberated from my enslavement. So that is theme number one in the book of Shemot, to become liberated from the inner enslavements of the soul that sap your vitality and become like an albatross on your neck, weighing you down, preventing you from going forward. You know, I think of this, think about Cain, going back to the, not the first sin, but the second sin of humanity. The first sin was Oded and Chaya eating from the Eitz Hadas. But it went downward from then. The next one is murder. And Cain turns to Hashem at one point. And Cain says, Gadol avoni mineso. My sin is greater than I can bear. You know, it's good to keep mental pictures of what that's describing. It's describing an avon, an avera, as if it's a rock, if it's a weight that's on your back. It's weighing you down. It's crushing you. It's crushing you spiritually and in some ways even physically, because it will have even physical symptoms. And when a person is liberated from those mitzrayim, there is a certain freedom and an expansiveness. David HaMelech says, when Hashem seeks and redeems me from the Meitzar, B'merchav anani, He has given me harchava, He has given me expansiveness. Right, so that's theme number one, and we've been talking about that theme the past few weeks. But theme number two, which now comes into being last week and also this week as well, Matan Torah, it's both Yitro and Mishpatim, deal with Matan Torah, really makes a second and related point. It is not enough to be freed and liberated from that which destroys you. You have to use your freedom in a constructive and productive way, and that is by submission to the will of God. Just as you find with the Chagim, that Pesach, which is the holiday of freedom, is linked to Shavuot, that is the holiday of Torah, and it's linked by Sfirat HaOmer. And in fact, the rabbinic name for Shavuos is Atzeret. Now, Atzeret literally means the conclusion, meaning Atzeret is considered to be the conclusion of Pesach. In fact, the Ramban has a lashon that Sfirat HaOmer is one long Chol HaMoed. So if you tell your boss you don't work during Chol HaMoed, you might use it as an excuse for a very long vacation. But as I say, no guarantee the job is going to be waiting for you at that point. Now, why is there a need for a linkage? Because a very, very simple idea, and that is freedom is worthless unless it is linked to the nobility of using that life in a holy way in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In fact, Chazal make the point in a very simple way. They point out that the grain offering that is brought on Pesach in the Beis HaMikdash is the Omer. That the Omer is a measure of barley, and that is typically animal fodder. In those days, before challenge was invented, barley was largely animal fodder. On Shavuot, we bring a grain offering as well, but it's wheat, which is fit for human consumption. Chazal actually make the point that freedom without submission to Hashem is the freedom of the wild animal. It is only on Shavuot that there is a human dignity to our freedom. And therefore, when the Torah here is tracing the progression of what is a spiritual life, it follows liberation with submission. Now, in some ways, we look at that as almost a contradiction. I become free and then I submit myself. But in truth, there's a beautiful metaphor that the Indian poet Tagore said, and he was not referring to Jews. He probably didn't know any Jews, or at least they were not in his circle. But he was referring to humanity generally. And he described the beauty of a human soul as analogous to the music that a violin string is capable of producing. Very, very beautiful music. But if you take the string and simply let it loose on the table, take a loose string, put it on the table, what music will you be able to get out of it? You'll be able to get nothing out of it. Paradoxically, on some level counterintuitively, although obviously science has an explanation for this, the string is capable of producing the beautiful music only when it's tied down on a frame and is confined and doesn't have this unlimited freedom. And Tagore was suggesting that a human soul is like a violin string. There is a beautiful music and potential within the souls of each and every one of us, but only if we tie ourselves down. Now, in many, many ways, this is true in many areas beyond Torah as well. Let's look, for example, at great artists, whether it's painters, whether it's musicians. Take Picasso or take the jazz people who improvise and they have riffs, and you're beginning to play an instrument and you want to do riffs, and instead you're told you have to practice scales 3 hours a day. And you say, scales are so boring, they're not interesting, they're not creative. I want to create. But you see, in order to go beyond the bounds of anything, you have to first work within the boundaries. And it is precisely the discipline of sustained effort that eventually liberates and opens up creativity. That is the difference between Picasso and a 3-year-old who simply scribbles. Now again, for many people, and I may even include myself, abstract art doesn't look much different than the 3-year-old. But I will have emunat art critics or emunat secular chachamim that there is a difference. And the difference primarily is that when freedom and improvisation are wedded to a commitment to a technique, it then becomes an elevated activity. Now, that's in areas other than Torah. But certainly in life, that's true as well. In Jewish life, that is very, very true. Freedom cannot be a purpose of existence. Freedom at best can be the condition to enable the achievement of purpose. It is not the goal of life. Eric Fromm once remarked, freedom cannot just be freedom from something. Freedom has to be freedom towards something. And thus, the Torah always connects Matan Torah and Yitziat Mitzrayim. In fact, one might offer the following speculation. We know that Ashkenazim, at least, the first food that they have at the Seder meal, after they've had the obligatory matzah and maror, is a hard-boiled egg. Right? They dip a hard-boiled egg in salt water. And there are different reasons that are given, but one of the reasons that are given is that an egg is the same food that you would give a mourner coming back from the cemetery, because the egg in its oval shape represents the notion of the circle or the cycle of life, that yes, there are bad times, but there will be good times. Well, what does that have to do with Leil Pesach? Well, number one, Leil Pesach, we commemorate the Korban Pesach, and we don't have the Korban Pesach today. So there's actually a certain sadness as to what we don't have. So the Achilah of the Beitzah is a Nichum Avelim. It is a type of comfort for the mourner. But then, some commentaries take it one step further. There's a direct connection to mourning, because the first night of Pesach, the first day of Pesach, is always the same day of the week as the 9th of Av, later in the summer. So the very day of the week or the night of the week that we are celebrating our liberation from Mitzrayim is the night that becomes designated as a Bechiyah L'Dorot, the eternal crying until we have the Beis HaMikdash. Now that's the way the Jewish calendar happens to work out, but there are never coincidences. Everything has a deep meaning and a deep connectivity. And here is what I would suggest just as a speculation. The first night of Pesach is the only night that represents complete freedom that is not yet connected to Matan Torah, because the counting of the Omer does not start until the second night. So the first night is freedom without Torah. Maybe the calendar association is freedom without Torah is going to get you a Tisha B'Av. So in a sense, the eating of the egg is a substitute for not counting the Omer until the second night. Of course, why in Chutz La'aretz, where they make a second Seder, they still eat the egg even though they count the Omer? Okay, that's simply a question of calendrical doubt and the like. So that is theme number 2, right? So theme number 1 is Yetziat Mitzrayim. Theme number 2 is Matan Torah. And then we come to theme number 3, building a Mishkan, building a dwelling place. Mishkan we translate tabernacle, but the word Mishkan means a dwelling place. Chesed. And here the critical verse is V'yasu li mikdash. Hashem commands Moshe, they shall make for me a sanctuary, a holy place. V'shachanti b'tocham. So I will reside in them. Chazal make the very critical and important observation that the Torah does not say, God does not say, I will dwell in the tabernacle. But God says, I will dwell in your heart and in your soul. The Beit HaMishkan, which later, of course, morphed into the Beit HaMikdash and Yerushalayim, is first and foremost a symbol of the presence of Hashem within our heart and within our soul. And that is why it's been brought down in different sources that although the physical temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av, but that's because by that time it was just a building. The divine presence had already been banished from our hearts and our souls at some indeterminate point. And at that point, God no longer lives there. Anybody could destroy it. The Medrash tells us that Nebuchadnezzar was very proud that he had vanquished God in his dwelling place. And Hashem said, you did nothing. You ground up flour that was already ground. I vacated the premises long before you. And in fact, the Navi Yecheskel, and again, just to be sure people understand the historical placement of the 3 called major prophets, all prophets are major, but the 3 big prophetic books, Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, and Yecheskel. I'm sure people understand this. Yeshayahu lived much earlier than the other 2. Yeshayahu lived around the time prior to the exile of the 10 tribes. This was more than 100 years before the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash. But Yecheskel and Yirmiyahu are mamash contemporaries. Both of them were alive when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Yirmiyahu was actually in Eretz Yisrael, and he was a witness to the destruction, as we know of the book Eicha. Yecheskel had already been exiled in Babylonia 11 years earlier. So he was not in Eretz Yisrael, but he was the Navi to the Jewish population that was already in Babel more than 11 years before the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And at various times in the book of Yecheskel, we are told he is transported miraculously back and forth from Babylon to Yerushalayim. Now, how you understand that? Was it a literal, physical, like magic carpet type of trip? Or was it a dream? You know, that's a machlokes among the commentaries. Is Yecheskel dreaming this? Or is this an actual physical movement? But whatever it is, he describes a very, very powerful scene of the Shekhinah moving from one place to another place as it gradually leaves the Beis HaMikdash and then leaves Yerushalayim. He talks about it. It was in the Kodesh HaKodashim, and then it went into the courtyard, and then it went on top of the altar, and then it went on top of the wall, and then it went into the city, and from the city it went to the Mount of Olives, Har HaZeitim, where it kind of disappeared. And at each stage the Shekhinah stopped and waited and hoped and yearned for us to do tshuva. And then the Shekhinah would come back. But we did not do tshuva. Yecheskel describes, in a very graphic sense, the journeys of the Shekhinah, because Hashem was no longer in our heart and in our soul. So when we say we have an obligation to build the Beis HaMikdash, the question becomes, what is the nature of that obligation? There is a mitzvah called V'yasu li mikdash. Now there is a group in Israel, the Temple Mount people who take this mitzvah quite literally, and they have some sources and say, we have an obligation to build a Beis HaMikdash. If that means bombing the mosques or whatever it is, we have to do it. There is such a position. It is not the mainstream halachic position. The Rambam, for example, writes explicitly that the Beis HaMikdash is not going to be rebuilt until Mashiach comes. As opposed to saying, build it and that'll bring Mashiach, the Rambam says, Mashiach's job is to build the Beis HaMikdash. We are not supposed to be physically involved in building the Beis HaMikdash until Mashiach comes. And of course, Rashi's opinion in Masechet Shavuos is that the third Beis HaMikdash is not going to be built by man at all. It will be Yored Min HaShamayim. So, if according to Rashi it will be Yored Min HaShamayim, and according to the Rambam the mitzvah is Mashiach's mitzvah, then what are we supposed to do in terms of building a Beis HaMikdash? Do we simply do nothing at all? And the answer is very simple, but very hard. Our job is to make our hearts and our souls a dwelling place for our Kodesh Baruch Hu. Because that is what will bring the Beis HaMikdash. If the Beis HaMikdash is a symbol of V'shachanti b'tocham, then until there is a Shachanti b'tocham, you're not going to have the symbol. So therefore, our job is to build the internal Beis HaMikdash by keeping the Torah, by Avas Yisrael, by Ava for Eretz Yisrael, by caring about this country, by the society, about Jews, and really caring about the world as a whole to the degree that we can have an impact in a positive way. And then we make our heart and our soul a repository for the Shekhinah, and that is how we fulfill V'yasuli Mikdash. So in a sense, therefore, the book of Shemos is really an archetype. It's really a pattern for the journey that we have to move from Yetziat Mitzrayim, getting rid of our constrictions, blockages, and limitations, taking our freedom and devoting ourselves to noble and spiritual and holy ends, and ultimately making our heart and our soul a dwelling place for the divine presence. And that is what the book of Shemos is. And that's why the Ramban writes that the alternative name for the book of Shemos is Sefer HaGeula, the book of redemption, referring not only to historical redemption, but the redemptions that we ourselves have to go through. So now I just want to share with you a brief thought from the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, the great Rav Or HaChaim, Rav Chaim Ben Attar, in which he takes one pasuk prior to Matan Torah, and he develops a four-step plan for us to receive Hashem's Torah in our lives. We know that the Ramban writes that there's a mitzvah to remember Har Sinai every single day. Just as we remember the Exodus, we remember the experience of Matan Torah. Because Matan Torah should be something that we're doing every single day. And thus, the steps that the Jewish people had to take to be makabel the Torah then are going to be steps we have to take now. So now, at the beginning of Shemos, Perek Yutes Pasuk Aleph, it tells us, B'chodesh HaShlishi, it was the third month, let's say it's B'nai Yisrael Meretz Yisrael from the time they left Mitzrayim, because Nisan Iyar Sivan, Bayom Hazeh, on that very day, on Rosh Chodesh Sivan, Bo'u Midbar Sinai, they came to the Sinai desert. Okay, so now we are told they have arrived at Midbar Sinai or Har Sinai. The next pasuk seems to be repetitive and gives you no new information. The next pasuk says, Vayisu Merfidim. They left Refidim. Well, we know from Parshas Beshalach that they left Refidim. Refidim is an oasis where Amalek attacked them. That was the war with Amalek. So we know they left Refidim. Why doesn't it have to be stated? And then it says, V'yavo Midbar Sinai, they came to Midbar Sinai. Well, we know that from Pasuk Aleph. Vayachanu b'Midbar, and they encamped there. Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged Ahar, and they encamped by the mountain. So Pasuk Beis, which is telling us nothing more than they left Rephidim and they came to Sinai, is repetitive of Pasuk Aleph, which tells me they were at Sinai, and the end of Parshas B'Shalach that says they left Rephidim. So what is the second Pasuk telling me that I already don't know from the first Pasuk? So the Orach Chaim HaKadosh tells us that the first Pasuk is telling me their geographical movement. They moved from Rephidim to Sinai. But the second pasuk is referring to the spiritual steps they had to take to be worthy of receiving HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah. And this is a 4-step plan. Step number 1, Vayisu mirephidim. They left Rephidim. Now what is Rephidim? So here is the thing. Rephidim is an oasis in the desert. Rephidim is the place where Amalek attacked us. We had a war with Amalek. We won. But Chazal see in the name Rephidim a secondary meaning. That Rephidim is not just the name of a place, but it is the reason why we were vulnerable to Amalek. And that is Rephidim can be broken down into 2 words. Rafu Yedehem min Torah. Rafu Yedehem, their hands were weak. Now this is an idiomatic expression, but essentially imagine the following. Imagine that you have to cross a busy street and you're holding your baby. Now obviously you're going to hold your baby very tight because something that you don't want to drop, you hold tightly. On the other hand, if you're crossing the street and you happen to have a tissue in your hand, unless you're a very strong environmentalist who absolutely refuses to litter, which is not a bad habit to have, even if you don't deliberately throw it in the street, but you'll hold it relatively loosely because you really don't care that much if it falls out of your hands. So idiomatically, therefore, Rafu Yedehem or Rifyon Yadayim is an expression that means a person doesn't deeply care about something. And therefore, Chazal Darshan, we were vulnerable to Amalek because we were in a state of Rephidim, Rafu Yedeim min Torah. We already had some Torah, we already had some mitzvahs, and we were doing them. But we did it without passion, without excitement, without fervor, in a state of rote and complacency and relative indifference. And when one lives a life of worship of God, in which there is a lack of passion and excitement, they are vulnerable to Amalek outside because they've incorporated Amalek inside. Now, this is actually very interesting because the common view we have of Amalek, when we think about Amalek as radical evil, we think about the uncontrolled axe murderer or terrorist who wants to destroy because they have an all-consuming cause. But in the lexicon of Chazal, they actually have a very different picture of Amalek. Amalek does not represent evil commitment or commitment, fanatical commitment to an evil cause. Amalek represents the cool voice of cynicism, in which things don't really matter, do they? So think about Amalek as maybe the post-Zionist university professor, so to speak, who basically says, you know, your belief that Jewish people mean anything is just a construct of your social environment and has no inherent meaning. By the way, we do have some very eminent, famous Israeli academics that have taken that very position. They have said there is no such thing as the Jewish people. So it's an interesting picture. So Amalek is not the fanatic terrorist who shouts Allah Akbar. but it's the cool, collected cynic who says nothing matters because it's all a matter of subjectivity. And yeah.
So then why are they willing to risk their lives to attack us?
Well, that's an interesting issue. The question becomes, can a person become so wedded to that itself becomes a fanatical operating principle? It's a little inconsistent. I do agree with you there. Therefore, the concept is, when I have coldness and indifference, I have the Amalekite within me. And that makes me vulnerable to the Amalekite outside of me. So, the first step to achieving a Matan Torah is leave Refidim. Not leave the place spatially, but leave complacency, leave indifference. Bring passion and excitement and fervor and enthusiasm to your religious life. Don't look at it as a burden. Find ways to make it vibrant. Now, going through the motions is better than not going through the motions. That much, I think, we will grant. But it is still such an impoverished, superficial connection to something that potentially could be so rich and so deep and so beautiful. You know, somebody once described that for many Orthodox Jews, they look at the Torah as a series of problems which they have to work around. Instead of 613 mitzvahs, there are 613 problems. Oh yeah, I got a kosher problem here, and a Shabbos problem here. And again, as I say, that is still worthy of respect because they are reordering their lives in order to follow the Torah. But they're not looking at the Torah as a source of joy and a source of life. They're looking at the Torah as kind of a negative baggage that we're kind of stuck with. But, you know, we'll work it out one way or the other. That's why, there's a phenomenon in some modern Orthodox communities in New Jersey, New York, called half Shabbos. I don't know if you heard about this. This is a problem with teenage girls, mainly in high school, that, they're Orthodox and they're committed to keep Shabbos, but they cannot stop texting on Shabbos. They do text messaging because that's the one thing they consider pikuach nefesh or something. The one thing they cannot stop doing is utilization of social media through a smartphone or whatever it is. So there's an expression in some of these communities, I keep half Shabbos. I would give them a little more credit, they probably keep 2/3 Shabbos, but whatever it is, it says, I keep everything but that. So there is some brilliant engineer who is trying to invent a kosher texting mechanism that can be done even on Shabbos. Now, the halachic basis for this, the halachic basis for this is very, 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 very questionable. But let's even imagine that some genius could come up with a permissible way to text message on Shabbos. Is that what we want? Baruch Hashem, the same thing I can do 6 days a week, I can do it on Shabbos too. That's the ultimate way of Shabbos is a problem, and I haven't been able to break this problem of what I can't do on Shabbos. Baruch Hashem, I have discovered a way to circumvent everything. Again, that goes back to the idea of Refidim, which the Torah is a problem instead of a source of life. So that's Vayisur Refidim. Make your Yiddishkeit passionate. Be invested in a joyous way. You know, the old Yiddish expression says, Shver zu sein a Yid. It's hard to be a Jew. And Rabbi Moshe Feinstein said, with maybe some exaggeration, that he felt that turned off a whole generation of Jews going back to the 20s and 30s. Because the only message they got was the negativity, because their parents, indeed there was a lot to complain about in many ways. People who had to get a new job every week, etc. And people who lived in poverty. But if a child grows up seeing and hearing only the negativities of Yiddishkeit, then at some point they're going to wonder, why am I suffering? Am I supposed to be a masochist? Is that what Judaism is about? What? So this is step one, leave Refidim. Okay. Step 2, I'm just following the pasuk based on the Orach Chaim. V'yisravidim vayavo midbar Sinai. They came to the midbar. What does that connote? So here the Orach Chaim says that one of the beauties of the midbar is that it is really devoid of a lot of materialism. There aren't fancy buildings and stores and all of these things, although probably today in the midbar you can probably find a mall. Well, Eilat, I guess, would be an example of that. But typically the midbar is an environment that is devoid of excessive materialism. So the Orach Chaim says, step 2 to be makabel the Torah is that we try to simplify our lives and not be excessively invested in material pleasure, hedonistic pleasure. Now this is a little tricky, because on one hand it is important to note that Judaism, by and large, with some exceptions, is not an ascetic religion. Judaism does not preach renunciation. Judaism does not encourage voluntary fasting. The Nazir, you'll recall, is treated as a sinner in our tradition because he's depriving himself of a legitimate pleasure, namely the drinking of wine in moderation. So it is true that we want people to enjoy the world and get pleasures. In fact, there's even a famous passage in the Jerusalem Talmud that says God is going to hold each of us to account for every permissible pleasure of the world that we could have enjoyed, and we didn't, because Hashem is going to say, I put it here for you, and you didn't use it. Rav Hirsch, who lived in Germany, said, any person, of course he was closer to the Alps, any person that does not go and see the Alps is going to be held to account for not seeing the magnificence of God's creation. However, as much as we do embrace the fullness of the beauties of the world, it is also true that the more we're invested in money and consumerism and hedonistic pleasure, the less sensitive our soul is going to be to the holiness of God's Torah and the joy of God's Torah. And the reason for that can actually be explained in simple psychology. Physical pleasures tend to give you instant gratification, and spiritual pleasures develop with time. And once a person is habituated to the instant, it is very, very difficult for them to see pleasure in that which takes a lot of time. I mean, in fact, this is a major educational concern about the internet generally. Not coming from yeshivas, coming from universities. That web surfing creates a kind of instant addictive gratification in which you get immediate answers to everything. As a result, it is found that students have less, starting from high school and even younger than high school, have less ability to concentrate, to follow a sustained argument, to read a book. I understand that the average university class used to be 50 minutes. Now the average online class is between 20 and 25 minutes. And the argument is that people do not have attention spans beyond 25 minutes. So there actually is major educational concerns about what the internet has done to our brains. I'm not referring to misuse of it with pornography and all that other stuff. I'm talking about regular, internet research and how it affects the quality of analysis. And again, it goes back to the idea that if you're a web surfer, you're not going to enjoy Shakespeare or Faulkner. Again, I might be exaggerating or overgeneralizing. These take work. Well, Torah takes work. Learning a piece of Gemara involves laborious concentration. And if you're overly invested in the physical, ephemeral pleasures of the world, you will not have the patience, or the Sitzfleisch, as we say in Yiddish. Right? So therefore the Orach Chaim says that the second, right, the first step is leaving Refidim. The second step is go to the desert. Simplify. And of course a simplified life, to the degree that we can do it, is also conducive to a greater relaxation, a greater serenity of spirit. Pesach Krohn tells the story that one of his Shabbos guests was a Baal Tshuva who had been a competitive cyclist in the Tour de France and the various European races. And when he became a Shomer Shabbos, he had to give up his professional career because all of these races are over Saturday, over weekends. So people ask him, and people always like to ask these questions, what was it like, to be a competitive, just like asking, what was it like to have a cheeseburger? What was it like to have oysters? What was it like, the Tour de France on Shabbos? And the person gave a very interesting answer. He actually said that keeping Shabbos is very much like a competitive bicycle race. How is that so? Because when you're competing at a world-class level, the differences between the winner and the second place are really fractions of a second sometimes. Very, very small, like an Olympic event, swimming, for example. It might be a tenth of a second. So what you do is you start discarding everything. You start discarding a hat, you're discarding a scarf, because maybe wearing a scarf slows you up by a fraction of a second. So he says being a cyclist taught him an important lesson in life. Get rid of the baggage that drags you down. He says, and to me, he said, that's what Shabbos and that's what Judaism kind of represents. Get rid of the surplus baggage. There's a lot of stuff we don't need. There's a lot of surplus emotional baggage. That goes back to the Mitzrayim. And there's a lot of surplus material baggage that we can get rid of as well to create a life of simplicity. And that is Midbar. The beauty of the desert, as many photographers and artists will attest, is precisely in its simplicity and its kind of emptiness. Now, step 3. But after it says V'yavo Midbar Sinai, it seems to repeat V'yachanu ba Midbar. Midbar is mentioned a second time. So the Orach Chaim says maybe Midbar does double duty. The first Midbar is to disengage from materialism. The second Midbar connotes humility, because another connotation of emptiness is one is not filled with ego and kavod, and this reminds us of the idea. Now here you do have a mixed metaphor, because Chazal used the metaphor of water to express humility. There's a famous Chazal that the Torah is compared to water, because just as water goes from the high to the low, the Torah leaves the arrogant and goes to the humble. So Chazal use water as an expression of humility. The Orach Chaim is using desert, almost the opposite, as the expression of humility. But the point is the same point, and that is humility is an indispensable element in the learning and the absorption of Torah. And once again, there's a very simple reason for that. A person that is humble is willing to admit their mistakes, is willing to rethink a conclusion that may be wrong because they're not invested in their ego. They're willing to ask without fear of being embarrassed. A person with ego is not willing to admit their mistakes, is not willing to ask, will stand by a position even though it's no longer a valid one. And therefore, to truly, truly understand Torah, there has to be humility. And they tell a beautiful story about the great Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that as a young man, he was applying for a position as a Rosh Yeshiva in Bayit Vagan, and which of course he got in Kol Torah, which is a position that he got, but he had to try out. So how do you try out to be a Rosh Yeshiva? You have to give a shiur in front of the other Rosh Yeshivas, and they determine if your shiur is good or not. So he gave a shiur, and in the middle of his complicated shiur, one of the senior Rosh Yeshivas asked him a question on the shiur. And Rav Shlomo Zalman thought for a moment, and he said, "You're right, my whole shiur is incorrect, and I'm just going to stop here because everything I said is not right." He went home to Shari Chesed. He told his wife, "I messed up. I really goofed. Don't have the job. We're going to live in poverty. Until something else comes up." And in the meantime, this goes all the way, I think, to 1949, shortly after the State of Israel. In the meantime, nobody had phones in those days, but like the store, there was a phone call, the store had a phone, and somebody runs up 3 steps, says, there's a phone call for you. And it's a call from the Rosh Yeshiva of Kol Torah saying, we want to offer you the job to be a Rosh Yeshiva in Kol Torah. And Rosh Shlomo Zalman said, but why should you offer me the job? I messed up, I gave a share and it got refuted. He says, that's the person we want. The person who is willing to admit publicly that they made a mistake. That is the great role model, the greatest role model we could have for our students. And Rosh Shlomo Zalman actually explained it later to his Talmidim, that a person that is reasonably proficient in learning can usually get his way out of things. Meaning somebody can ask you a question, and you'll give them some answer. And maybe your answer would be good enough that they think that you've answered the question. But you may know, in your heart of hearts, that it's not totally true, and the question is better than the answer. So a lot of people, even great Talmidei Chachamim, might try to finesse it. They can get themselves out of the hot water. But the greatest of the great, if they know that the question is stronger than the answer, they will admit. And this is the second midbar. So the first midbar is simplicity. The second midbar is humility. Humility. And by the way, this is true with parents as well. I'm sure you both have this experience. Sometimes a parent, a student, a child asks a parent a question on the parsha, whatever it is. And a parent might be a little embarrassed if they don't have the answer, that their child is going to think that they're not the greatest person in the world, etc. But the truth of the matter is, for a parent to tell a child, I don't know, let's look it up, let's learn together, let's see if we can come to an answer, that is a tremendously beautiful and important lesson in which you're telling the child, learning is a lifetime activity. And we work on it together. And if there's something we don't know, that's not a chisaron, that is not something wrong with us. It just means it's something we work on together. So saying, I don't know, is not a cop-out and it's not a failure. It is actually a lesson to a child that could pay great, great dividends later. Okay, so far we've mentioned 3 steps. We've mentioned embracing enthusiasm and passion. That's leaving Refidim. The first midbar is simplicity of lifestyle. And the second midbar is humility. And then we have the last part of the pasuk. On this, Chazal gave us a drasha. After it says, Vayachanu b'midbar, they encamped in the desert, it repeats, Vayichan shel Yisrael neged Or, they encamped next to the mountain. It's a repetition, but here Rashi points out that the first time it mentions the verb encamping, it was a plural, Vayachanu, and here it says Vayichan, and the drasha is, Ish echad u'v'lev echad. In order to receive Hashem's Torah, we had to be Ish echad u'v'lev echad. Unity. Without unity, there cannot be Kabbalat HaTorah, because Hashem did not give the Torah to individual Jews. Hashem gave the Torah to the Jewish people. If you are not connected to the people, you as an individual cannot be deserving of receiving Hashem's Torah. Ish echad u'v'lev echad. In the Dayenu, in the Haggadah, we have all these Dayenus. If something would have happened, even if the other things wouldn't have happened, Dayenu. Now, Dayenu doesn't mean it's enough. It means it would have been enough to give thanks to Hashem. It doesn't mean it would have been, for example, if Hashem would have taken us out of Mitzrayim and not given us the Shalal, etc., so we still would have been grateful, but we're not saying it's enough. So some of the Dayenus raise a lot of problems. I'm not going to go over every problematical one. But one of the interesting Dayenus is, Ilu kervanu lifnei Har Sinai. If Hashem would have brought us to Har Sinai, v'lo nasan lanu es Torah, and wouldn't have given us the Torah. Dayenu, that's enough to be grateful for. So the Mefarshim asked the obvious question. I understand a lot of the other ones. If he would have taken us out of Mitzrayim, even if other things wouldn't have happened, we would have experienced such a great thing. But what would have been so good with being brought to Har Sinai and not getting the Torah? What would the point have been? So some Mefarshim understand it, that at Har Sinai we reach the Madrega of Ish Echad U'Valev Echad. One person, one soul. So even if we wouldn't have gotten the Torah, but we achieved that level, Dayenu, that would have been enough to give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I think I mentioned a few weeks ago Rav Hutner's very humorous remark, which unfortunately has a ring of truth. Somebody asked Rav Hutner, remember the story in the Gemara about the 70 elders who were gathered by Ptolemy, one of the post-Alexander the Great kings of Egypt, of the Ptolemaic Empire, and they were put in separate rooms and they were told to translate the Torah into Greek. This is the Septuagint, the famous Targum of the 70. And Chazal recorded tradition that there was a miracle, that the 70 elders working in different rooms came up with the exact same translation, including the various deviations that they felt necessary to make. Right? Tremendous miracle, the Targum HaShivim. So somebody asked Rav Hutner, are we expected to believe that miracle actually happened? So Rav Hutner said, if they would have been in the same room and they came up with the same, that would have been a bigger miracle. Because in the same room there would have been so much machlokas, there certainly would not have been a consensus. And this is the nature of the Jewish world. Now, Jews argue, nothing wrong with that. I mean, the whole Gemara is a book of 2,700 folio pages of argumentation. Actually, minus around 10. There's one parak in Shas, Ezeu Makoman, that has no machlokas at all. That's why it's part of the davening every morning. But every other parak in Shas filled with machlokas. So of course we argue. This is the lifeblood of the oral law and the halachic process. Different views are explored. That makes each one have a richer and deeper understanding. The point is not to muzzle debate and silence discussion. That's not the Jewish way, that's not the Torah way, that's not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. But to be able to do it without hatred, without animosity, with respect for the different views that people have, to have an achdus. We know that Chazal tell us that the second mikdash was destroyed because of sinat chinam, and it will not be rebuilt until we overcome sinat chinam. So we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, ergo, the sinat chinam is still here. Although I don't think I need to prove it from anything. I think it's something all of us know. So the Orach Chaim has given us a very simple state, 4-factor formula. How does one accept Hashem's Torah in his life? Number 1, leave refidim. Embrace Torah with passion and excitement and joy. Number 2, go to the midbar, simplify your life, be menatek yourself from excessive involvement in the material. Number 3, yachanu b'midbar, be humble and willing to learn from all. And number 4, embrace unity in Ahavat Yisrael. And these are the 4 steps that the Jewish people had to take to be makabel the Torah at Har Sinai, and these are the 4 steps that we have to take as we accept the Torah in our own lives every single day. It's interesting that the holiday of Shavuot is called Zaman Matan Toratenu, the day that God gave us the Torah. So people ask the question, why is it not called Zaman Kabbalat Torasenu, the day that we received the Torah? Why is there an emphasis on Hashem giving rather than our receiving? And one of the answers that is given is, Hashem gave the Torah, that was a singular event. But our receiving the Torah is something we have to do every single day. You can't assign a date to Kabbalat Torah because it's something we have to do every single day. This is what we say in the Shema. Every single day, the Torah must be new and vibrant to us. So B'Yeshes Hashem, as we learn these parshios, may we be zocha to be inspired. And again, may the words of Torah be ilui nishmat. Tamar bat
Oded.
Tamar bat Oded, and may it bring it to a higher and higher place in Gan Eden. Thank you for these
Shir Chadash